Bonjour à tous, bienvenue à
Good afternoon to all. We're about to start this session on ADHD and dual disorders. There have been a few changes in the speakers who we're going to talk to this afternoon. The first presentation will be given by Nestor Sadman.
C'est-à-dire le lien entre
ADHD
ADHD et dual disorder.
and dual disorder.
Est-ce que l'impulsivité peut être ce lien?
What about the link between the two
Merci
concepts?
beaucoup. Thank you. Thank you to all the attendees. First, due to personal reasons, Dr. Professor Martinez Raga is not able to be here with us today, and I'm going to talk about more or less about the same topic, the same issue. I can have much time to prepare the presentation, but okay, I try to talk some things that I think are important in this special topic. This presentation happens start with one question: is impulsivity the link? Okay. I think is the answer. The simple answer is yes. No, is the link. But I try to talk something more about the impulsivity. Okay. Okay. This is my disclosure. There are different questions that I'm going to talk about in this presentation. Okay. First, what do these men have in common? Okay. I don't know exactly what is the answer, but I can think about some things about these men have in common. One is all of them don't talk about the brain, about the genes, because it was another time or for other reasons. All of them ignore Darwin ideas. And all of them ignore the ADHD. Probably there are more things, but it's one way to think about this, to start this presentation. According to the scientific community, all mental disorders are considered nowadays brain disorders. Mental disorders, brain disorders, this means that this involve brain circuits that implicate specific domains of cognition, emotion, and behavior. We're speaking of brain disorders. This slide doesn't make sense because there are not different brain areas where different mental disorders, including addictive disorders or substance use disorders in this case, are located. It's without sense. But still now, dual disorders are ignored. According to this recent statement from the United Nations Commission on Narcotic Drugs, lack of attention related to dual disorders is driven in part by lack of training of clinicians in how to diagnose and treat dual disorders, as well as by the structural differentiation and lack of coordination between programs to treat mental disorders and substance use disorder or addictive disorders. This statement was written by Nora Volkov, the NIDA director, and other colleagues. There are a lot of problems related to dual disorder, but one of them, and this important one, is the lack of sensitivity and reliability of the current diagnostic criteria of mental disorders. Every categorical diagnosis in the current classification of mental disorder, they doesn't allow to include different mental symptoms, different personality traits. It's very difficult because the DSM-5 is based on the old classification of Kraepelin more than 1 century ago. Okay, I was talking about mental disorders, brain disorders, and we need to consider this perspective, not just in dual disorder, but in all mental disorders, of course, including substance use disorders. We need to change, to move from looking at mental disorder from a psychiatric perspective, from looking at them from neuroscience perspective. Instead of a top-down approach, we need a bottom-up approach. This paper was published in Science, I think a few years ago. It's talking about, it's signed by the Brainstorm Consortium. It's a big consortium talking about genetic or genes and heritability in all mental disorders. The conclusion of this very important paper are common variant risks for psychiatric disorders was shown to correlate significantly with heritability. And look at the following statement, especially among ADHD, bipolar disorder, major depressive disorder, and schizophrenia. There is a long way from the genotype to the phenotype, how how they show the mental symptoms or mental function are expressed in nature. We need to define an intermediate step that we call endophenotypes. It's based on heritability basis. There are a lot of clinical endophenotypes that intermediate the long way between genotype and phenotype. One of them, for example, is the disinhibition, impulsivity, and other endophenotypes. For example, we define personality traits as endophenotypes, some of them. And personality traits determine vulnerability or resilience to substance use disorder and, of course, other mental disorders. This paper was signed by Nora Volkov and other colleagues. Okay, and this is a long introduction in order to talk about ADHD. From the current perspective of mental disorders, both the evolutionary psychiatry and neurodevelopmental perspective, ADHD is a way of being and relating to the world. And in other words, it's a condition, not an illness. Therefore, not everyone needs treatment. On the contrary, it can be an adaptive trait that brings advantage to many people. ADHD, as a categorical diagnosis, represents the extreme of a continuum of fundamental features. It's the same like in psychotic symptoms. There are people who are very odd or very people weird and with the schizotypical traits. And the other extreme of the scale is we can define schizophrenia. Okay, this is a paper from Lasky and colleagues that he's talking about we can consider different work environment that could be adaptive for people who are suffering, who are having these traits of ADHD or impulsivity. Okay, ADHD disorder, categorical diagnosis or syndrome. ADHD is ubiquitous syndrome that can be presented in all diagnostic categories. First, ADHD with no other symptoms, I think it's very difficult. Probably Arkady is going to talk about it. We need to identify ADHD full diagnosis or some part of the diagnosis in people who are suffering from psychotic symptoms or syndrome, by affective disorders, bipolar depressive disorder, anxiety disorders, OCD, and different personality disorders, and eating disorders, and substance use disorders plus gambling or plus behavioral addictions. Some experts said that, okay, ADHD is in the submerged part of the iceberg. I don't think so. I think the clinicians, we need to identify, we need to think about ADHD in order to diagnose, to make a diagnosis of ADHD. Okay, as we can see, ADHD is a multifactorial syndrome presented with different phenotypes. It can be presented with both externalizing and internalizing disorders. It's not just, we need to think in all the categorical diagnoses, we need to think and identify when are together with ADHD or some traits or some part of the ADHD. Despite shocking data from epidemiology and neurosciences, few psychiatrists feel comfortable diagnosing and treating adults with ADHD, and even less when they have to treat very frequent dual disorders. The reasons are complex and refer to historical causes, since adult ADHD was not considered a mental disorders until DSM-IV in 1994. It's resisted by the psychodynamic field, being a disorder not described by psychoanalytic theory. It has very clear biological basis, and which require treatment with psychostimulant, which defies current morality. Addictive disorders have so far exist as orphans of an integrative perspective, such as the proposed by dual disorder fields. Substance use disorders are described as the use of toxic substances. I think in Spain and in France we are talking about toxic substances for pleasure or as vices, and we are talking about pleasure circuit. It's ridiculous, but we can hear about it every day. Psychiatrists describe them not knowing that the existence of an addiction is related to neurobiological dysfunction of brain system and circuits that are also involved in other mental in other mental disorders. Okay, this paper was published, I think, 4 or 5 years ago, was published in the New England Journal of Medicine. It was written by Nora Volkow, George Koob, and Tom McClellan. It was written in order to support the brain disease model of addiction. Some of the key points of this essential paper are only a minority of people who use drugs ultimately become addicted. In fact, the most severe phenotypic characteristic of addiction will develop in only approximately 10% of people exposed to addictive drugs. 10%, 1 in 10 people exposed to addictive drugs develop a phenotype of addictive disorders. Why is this? I think the answer is in the precision psychiatry concept. Susceptibility differs because people differ in their vulnerability to various neurodevelopmental, genetic, and environmental factors. Over the last decades, different neurobiological theories about addictive disorders have been proposed by researchers. Most of them with the focus on the brain reward system, on the dopaminergic brain reward system. But we know that, as David Belin has written, addiction is going beyond the dopaminergic on the brain reward system. We need to know that there are another endogenous systems, such as endocannabinoid system, the opioid system, the cholinergic nicotinic system, that are involved not just in addictive disorder, but of course in other mental disorders. We have introduced the concept of precision psychiatry in the field of dual disorders. From this perspective, we need to consider, for example, initiatives like neuroscience-based nomenclature, NBN, is a new system of classifying psychotropic drugs by their pharmacological profile. This initiative was developed to replace the current indication-based nomenclature, for example, antidepressant, antipsychotic, stimulant, in order to know the drugs for the mechanism of action. But from the dual disorder field, we go one step further. We know that psychotropic drugs, and substances are psychotropic drugs, can have distinct effects depending on individual brain differences. The same substance or the same substances give rise to distinct behavioral, affective, cognitive, and sensory effects in different persons. For example, and apply to this talk. A stimulant calm some individuals and decrease their impulsivity, whereas they excite and generate impulsivity in others. These different effects may also be found in relation to alcohol, nicotine, cannabis, and opioid, of course. Okay, the assessment of the problematic use of substances is of course, very important. It can be underestimated in the mental health network or overestimated in addiction centers. However, both networks ignore the presence of a possible and persistent ADHD. Dual disorder can also be expressed as addictive disorder without substances, such as gambling disorder, video gaming disorders, and other behavioral addictions. There are different etiological hypotheses of the association of ADHD and addiction. There are phenomenological explanations based on impulsivity or self-medication hypotheses. There are neurobiological explanations and other different hypotheses. But there is evidence of preference for the use of there is evidence of preference for the use of tobacco and cannabis in individuals with ADHD as self-medication. Also, we can include cocaine and look at this last statement. ADHD adolescents appear to continually play online video games to unconsciously enhance attentional ability. Adolescents who are suffering from attentional deficit, they can involve in video games in gaming in order to improve their problem with attentional deficit. Okay. This is another paper, was published 2 or 3 years ago. The title was published in Molecular Psychiatry, ADHD and Lifetime Cannabis Use, Genetic Overlap and Causality. It's an European multinational study. This study came from the meta-analysis of GWAS of ADHD. They found support that ADHD is causal for lifetime cannabis use, with an odds ratio of almost 8 points for cannabis use in individuals with ADHD in comparison to individuals without ADHD. Every person who are coming with a cannabis use disorder, we need to think in them, and we need to treat, to identify if they are suffering ADHD. This result reinforced the need to consider cannabis misuse in the context of ADHD in clinical interventions. Related to tobacco, dual disorders are determined by genetic and environmental factors, as well as by self-medication hypotheses. Adolescent patients medicated for ADHD start smoking tobacco at a later age than ADHD adolescent without treatment, without any medication. And nicotine, bupropion, and varenicline improve the symptom of ADHD. But we know that ADHD is frequent in persons who are suffering behavioral or addiction without substances. The gambling disorder is included in the addiction chapter. In some eating disorder are also mentioned as addictive equivalents. The high incidence of ADHD, concurrent dual disorders with this psychopathological expression is known. Also, the stimulant drugs approved for ADHD have received FDA approval, although not in Europe, in order to treat binge eating disorder, for example, thus opening the possibility in the future to treat these dual disorders with a single drug. We have introduced the concept of dual disorders in gambling dual disorders. We have published this paper 1 year ago from our group in Madrid, Spain, talking about gambling dual disorders. Lifetime prevalence of ADHD in adults with gambling disorders was almost 30%, and 1 in 4 of the study population have full ADHD according to DSM-5. The prevalence, okay. I would like to highlight the last statement from this paper. Individuals with gambling disorders plus ADHD disorder spend more time playing, and this had a sedative effect and developed a faster and more severe gambling disorder. More severe gambling disorder is probably that are suffering impulsivity, all of them, in the majority, including if they are suffering in other diagnostic categories, such as depression or anxiety or in other categories. And we need to think in all of them in ADHD. Okay, this was, I started with my presentation with this question. If is impulsivity the link? Well, all of you know what means impulsivity, different scales for impulsivity. According to research in neuroscience, impulsivity is an endophenotype and an inherited trait. It can present in different categorical diagnoses, both externalizing or internalizing disorders. Temperamental impulsivity, impulsivity as trait, is more associated with externalizing disorders. And from the neurobiological point of view, impulsivity trait is associated with reduced density of D2, D3 receptors in midbrain. Impulsivity, as you know, is a symptomatic dimension of ADHD. Can be a transitory state or personality traits, both of which can predispose an individual suffering from ADHD to problematic use of some substances. Impulsivity is common in individuals suffering from addiction with or without substances, especially if are co-occurrence with ADHD. However, impulsivity is not necessary to diagnose addictive disorder because there are another addictive disorders without impulsivity. Impulsivity trait and addiction to cocaine. Traits, I explained that we consider from the neuroscience perspective, such as endophenotype, of sensation seeking and impulsivity are present in individuals addicted to substances. People with sensation seeking traits still have some control over drug use, unlike impulsive people. Impulsivity trait in rats predicts the compulsive consumption of cocaine, but not the consumption of heroin. It's the contrary, it's a dichotomic proposal. My time is, I'm going well? Okay? 5 minutes, okay. Okay. Okay, we can see that impulsive rats have lower D2 receptors, and high impulsivity rats are predisposed to develop compulsive cocaine disorder. Okay, in all the field of substance use disorder, we need to consider the main 5 substances. But related to ADHD, we need to consider mainly tobacco use disorder, cannabis use disorder, and stimulants, cocaine and amphetamine or caffeine in some cases. The treatment of choice for ADHD with dual disorders is the multimodal approach, which combines pharmacological with psychosocial treatment. ADHD plus dual disorder with so many clinical expressions, different phenotypes, present a difficulty in reweaving control studies on psychopharmacological treatment with different therapeutic options. The quality of evidence for psychopharmacological treatment of ADHD with dual disorder is weak. Continuity of treatment is reduced in all clinical trials. A small sample size and a small number of studies gives unreliable results. Until now, the biology of addiction has focused treatment on the positive or negative reinforcement mechanism of drugs, but has forgotten that they can have possible benefits. The goal should not be to block the rewarding effect of the substances, but to replace their benefits to meet the needs of the patients. Okay, despite the weakness and low quality of the scientific evidence, the preferential drug choice is confirmed as a stimulant in ADHD with dual disorders, together with specific treatment for substance use disorder in some cases. Okay, I'm going. Okay, to our precision treatment, ADHD and substance use disorders. ADHD and some type of substance use disorder could share common etiology. Psychostimulant and other accompanying medication could be used safely to treat both ADHD and substance abuse. The evidence suggests that individualizing treatment, precision psychiatry, is the key way to improve results. This is a study from the group of Francis Levin in the Columbia University. They are talking about ADHD plus addiction to cocaine treated with stimulants. And they found different possibilities. ADHD improved before cocaine abstinence, 24%. We need to think in this kind of study that in US, it's difficult to think when they are treating addictive disorder, the target is always abstinence. But we know that's not, in the real clinic, is not the main result. Okay, the second result was cocaine abstinence before improvement of ADHD, 12%. ADHD and cocaine abstinence in the same week, 6%. ADHD improved but not cocaine abstinence, 34%. Cocaine abstinence but not improvement of ADHD, 6%. And no improvement in either, 18%. Okay, there are different possibilities, but we need to consider that the dose of stimulants probably are lower, because in this kind of patient addicted to, with ADHD plus addiction to a stimulant, we are needing more and more dose of the treatment. Is there a risk that patients with ADHD will develop addiction when treated with a stimulant? This is a widespread belief due to poor understanding of scientific evidence. Published naturalistic follow-up studies over 10 years do not support this belief. This is the Stahl proposal. Probably all of you know that. I don't agree exactly with this proposal, because we think we need to treat, when we can, all the different symptoms in every patient in a personalized way, and not first one and another. Empirical evidence is practically non-existent. The few classic clinical guidelines recommend a drug-free period before starting drug treatment for ADHD, but the empirical data supporting this recommendation are more than limited. Consensus guidelines, such as the Canadian ADHD Practice Guideline, recommend deciding the order and priority of treatment based on the severity of the ADHD and the dual disorders being treated. In conclusion, it is my last slide. ADHD can be identified in all psychiatric disorders. We need to look at them. ADHD with dual disorder is an expectation and not an exception. Impulsivity is a phenomenological link between both ADHD and substance use disorders, mainly tobacco, cannabis, and cocaine. dopaminergic, endocannabinoid, and cholinergic nicotinic systems underlie this symptomatic expression. And psychopharmacological treatment can be simultaneous or sequential, depending on the individualization of the clinical cases that we call precision psychiatry. Stimulant treatment is essential in ADHD plus dual disorders. Thank you for attention. This is my last slide. We are organizing the following the next World Congress on Dual Disorders that will be in Mexico City in next June, probably after, if 1 or 2 weeks after Albatros. Okay, I hope to see all of you there. Thank you so much.
Alors, il nous faut remercier le professeur Nestor Sherman
I
de
would
cette
like to
présentation
thank
sur,
Professor
à la
Nestor
fois la
Sherman
partie,
for this
théorique,
presentation.
pourquoi est-ce
So
qu'il y a
you
tellement
presented
de
the
diagnostics
theoretical aspect, why we have so
et
many
substances,
diagnoses,
et aussi avec tous les apports
and also
à la fois sur l'impulsivité.
thank you for all the contributions on
Peut-être
impulsivity
cette association et en plus des perspectives de
and
traitement.
also
On va
the
garder
treatment
toutes les questions
outlooks.
pour la fin. Donc,
So
si
we're
vous avez
going
des questions
to ask the
sur cette,
questions
intervention,
after
notez
the presentation.
sur un petit
So
papier.
if you have any questions, please write it down.
La parole.
And we will hand over the floor to
Et donc, je passe la parole à Arcade Scolina.
Arcade
Peut-être
Scolina.
grâce à THS.
some of you probably know
grand congrès auquel vous avez pu
Arcades
assister
because of the
à Bayonne.
large convention that took place in Bayonne.
Au XAPA
is
BIA de Bayonne. Et nous allons écouter sur une
addictologist
présentation plus pratique, à la fois sur le
and a neuropsychologist and can talk about screening,
avec une perspective
diagnosis and treatment.
Merci Florence, merci aux organisateurs.
Thank you, Florence. I would like to thank the organizers, everyone. Also like to thank Mr. Sherman from WAD for having invited us to take part in this convention. Well, we all know about the current situation, and we all hope, obviously, that things will be easier for the next Albatros convention next year.
À ma place, José
And José Martinez Raga from Valencia was due to make this presentation, and I hope he'll be here in June.
Ici même. Donc, on a co-construit
We co-constructed this presentation some time ago together with José Martinez Raga, and hopefully I will be faithful to what he wanted to say. I would like to thank my two masters and friends, Jean-Pierre Deloued and Mr. Malcolm, who are in the room, I believe. And I also would like to tell you that, and you probably know this, there is a national ADHD coordination team, and Mr. Camara, who is in the room, chairs this structure. And for those of you who are interested in this topic, I would like to invite you to join this committee or commission. Let me give you some basic information on ADHD. It is a neurobehavioral disorder that is most frequent in children, between 3 and 7%. And 102 studies were done, and according to those studies, the average would be at 5.29%. So this is extremely high prevalence, bearing in mind that less than 10% of them are actually diagnosed and treated. ADHD tends to become chronic over time if it's not treated properly. In 2/3 of the cases, an ADHD that hasn't been treated properly will become chronic when the person becomes an adult. It is vastly underdiagnosed. It's often associated with comorbidity, so it's more often the rule than the exception, and it is treatable. In France, we might have a fewer therapies on hand, but in Spain, 10 days ago, we were at the Dual Pathology Congress in Sevilla, and they have more therapies on hand because all we have is methylphenolate. in adults, but this hasn't been the case for a very long time. And we have to prove, and this is specific in France, you have to prove, in order to treat an adult, you have to prove that the patient had ADHD as a child, retrospectively. So people refuse the fact that adults might have ADHD if there is no anterior diagnosis. ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder. It's common, it's complex, multi-factor disorder characterized by hyperactivity, impulsivity, and lack of attention symptoms. But this is just the tip of the iceberg.
L'usage des substances en général est une
use of substance use usually is a frequent comorbidity in ADHD patients.
Bon, là, vous avez un peu un continuum
This shows you the continuum. ADHD is seen as a brain cerebral disease, multi-factor disease, and there's also, it seems, a modification of the reward system, which might explain why many of our patients that we see at ARC-SAPA have ADHD and vice versa.
Bon, vous voyez, ce que je disais, donc les différentes causes,
those are the various causes. Genetic causes are being studied more and more. Neuroanatomic causes, environmental causes also. None of those causes should be neglected or omitted when we want to manage patients with this disorder. On this graph, you have hereditary issues, and it seems to be quite high because it comes just after weight and bipolar disorder. And those two first factors are properly diagnosed, but ADHD not so much. So this is the way the brain functions. I'm from neurobiology and I love this, but I won't go into all the details. What I was telling you early on is that several studies, and this is one of them, make the assumption that there is a dysfunctioning in the reward system, in which case the patients, if they self-medicate, as Nestor was saying earlier on, will try to offset the hyperactivation by consuming substances. It can be stimulants, cocaine, amphetamines, but also cannabis, tobacco, or alcohol. Those studies are many others are going to take place, and maybe imaging will also provide us with more information. This slide shows the studies carried out in various countries. Depending on the study, the prevalence varies slightly, but generally speaking, in children and adolescents, depending on the study, prevalence is between 3.4 and 7.2%. At the top of the graph, you will notice that prevalence seems to be higher in male than in female, and this is problematic because quite often girls are not diagnosed when they are children because they develop the impulsivity component less than boys. This is what we see in our clinics called practice, because boys tend to run and move a lot, and girls are more quiet. And they are often diagnosed at a later stage, and sometimes they are not even diagnosed at all. So this is something that we need to look into and to bear in mind when we treat our adult patients. According to studies, 2/3 of the children diagnosed with ADHD are going to retain the symptoms in adult age, and the prevalence is also between 3 and 5%.
Alors voici donc ce dont je parlais tout
This is what I was referring to, Ellen, the tip of the iceberg
Ce qu'on voit en
and the remaining part of the iceberg.
Nestor tout à l'heure,
As Nestor was saying, we have impulsivity, hyperactivity, inattention, just as the tip of the iceberg, but there are all sorts of associated comorbidities and disorders that
à moins de faire un diagnostic,
we might not see unless we do a detailed assessment. Those are the difficulties to integrate socially. Parents will notice that their child is having difficulties interacting with other children, or maybe when they come to see us when they're adults, they invite everyone to their birthday party, but are not necessarily invited in return, and their children are not being invited by other children at school. How come? Well, the parents of those children might not want to spend an entire afternoon running after a child, and they don't want to miss out on their child's birthday. What is this? An hypothesis. So quite often those children are not being invited. They're not invited, but they know that there is a birthday party, and this has an extremely negative impact on their self-esteem. Also, within a family, if you have brothers and sisters, if one of them has ADHD, quite often the parents or the teachers or family members tend to compare children with one another. How come you're not able to stay quiet just like your brother? How come you're not able to focus? How come you have to get down from the table always? How come we have to go to speak to your headmaster because you have those behavioral problems? And this is also having a major impact on those children's self-esteem. And this is something that will stay with them once they become adolescents or even adults. This is the reason why, on top of the pharmacological treatment, we need to introduce psychotherapeutic techniques or group therapy in order to boost that self-esteem. Those people also don't really tolerate frustration because as their brain is not working or functioning in a usual way, or what we consider as being a usual way, people with ADHD are looking for a reward after a few actions. If you tell an ADHD child that, well, in 6 months from now you have good grades, you will receive a gift, and it is just asking them to wait for too long. They need rewards on a regular basis, more often, and this is what helps them feel better. Also, when we ask them to do things, it's difficult for them to do tasks or to perform tasks in sequences. If you ask an ADHD child to go and grab a plover in their bedroom, then come downstairs, they take a piece of bread, go up again, brush their teeth, they take their bag, and then leave. Then it's too difficult. It's just too complicated. Then they go to the bathroom looking for their plover, can't find it, and then it takes time, and then parents get angry at them. So our advice when we talk to the families is to ask children to perform easy tasks, simple tasks, one at a time, and not 5 or 6 different things at a time, because this is something they simply cannot handle. Sleep disorders. Those tend to appear when the children are still quite young, and when they become adolescents, they will try to stay up for another 10 minutes, 15 minutes, another story, please, another bedtime story. I don't want to go to bed right now, because going to bed will raise the anxiety level. They will remember everything that has taken place at school throughout the day, and quite often it's not positive because they are often left aside, and this is going to delay sleep. Well, school personal issues, professional issues, anxiety, and their performance also. I mean, globally, generally speaking. And I insist on this because there are very famous examples of famous people who were able to achieve great things even with ADHD. But when those people find what they like to do, then they usually outperform others because they have tons of energy. But you have to make sure that energy can be used properly. If it's not being used properly, then they underperform, and then here again they are being left on the side right now. For those of you who know Michael Phelps, probably one of the greatest swimmers in history. He suffered a lot from ADHD when he was a child, and everyone was making fun of him, so he was so thin and so tall. And all that energy, they weren't as many drugs at the time, so he used that energy, and the only passion that helped him put ADHD under control was swimming. He won more than 50 Olympic medals, which is just amazing. Then you have the executive function disorders. It is extremely important to diagnose those. When we carry out an ADHD diagnosis, we use a Wurtz questionnaire, and we use DILA also. We also have to, and this is indispensable, we have to do neuropsychological tests in order to have a better view of the mental flexibility, processing speed, etc., so that we know exactly who the patient is before we start them on treatment. What are the typical trajectories? When you're a child, the impact is not as great because you have fewer things to do. Usually when you're a child, you have to go to school and play. Those are the two main things that you have to do. That being said, there can be many, many issues in both environments. But when a person becomes an adult, if the ADHD hasn't been diagnosed nor treated, it will lead to more issues because there are mood issues, mood instability, as Nestor said earlier on, low self-esteem that will worsen over time because the person will also be isolated at university or else, relationship problems, planning issues. It's difficult to organize, to do things, to complete projects. Because people have the feeling that they're doing all sorts at the same time, but in reality, they start all sorts of projects at the same time, but they never complete anything. So what we try to do with them in the psychotherapy exercises, with our exercises, to help them structure what they do throughout a week and a bit better organized.
La suite des choses. Les accidents de la route. Alors ça, on en parle.
Then road accidents.
Très souvent,
unfortunately, this is a major issue because ADHD adults often have small accidents because of their impulsivity and inattention. And insurance companies do not want to insure them because it's too expensive. It might seem no detail to you, but if you're the one impacted, it's really complicated if you're not able to get a car insurance. And this is something that nobody really talks about. So what are the consequences of ADHD in an adult and in a child? Well, usually they tend to have low grades, low diplomas. Sometimes there are issues within their couple, and they even have to get a divorce. And the yield at work is lower, or they might end up unemployed. And sometimes, why would ADHD people play video games? Well, they play video games because it changes all the time and they can remain focused. They will be able to spend hours playing a video game, but not able to focus if you ask them to watch a movie because they're not really interested in it. And a movie is something that is more of a continuum, if you will, whereas if they play video games, they will get lots of excitement.
Alors, quels sont les impacts sur
What are the impacts
d'un TDAH non traité? Donc, on s'aperçoit
on various
qu'ils vont avoir
environments?
50% de plus
Well,
de
50% more bike accidents,
différentes études, donc vous avez les références en bas.
33% more emergency room visits,
De plus de visites en service d'urgence.
and the numbers refer to the studies that are at the bottom of the screen. Because also regarding those accidents and ER visits, this is also due to the fact that they tend to be more impulsive and take more risks. Regarding school, occupation, 46% will be expelled. Many of them will drop out of school. Now, regarding substance abuse, they have a twofold risk of becoming substance users, and this might happen earlier on, and are less likely to quit in adulthood. Regarding the family environment, as I said, more divorces, and as far as job is concerned, a low productivity. This is an extremely interesting study. It's a Danish study, a large cohort of patients that compared within brothers and sisters, HDAD patients, and patients that hadn't been diagnosed. So I won't detail all the tables, but if you're interested, I'll send them to you. So to summarize, you have the differences between a treated ADHD and an untreated ADHD, or an ADHD and non-ADHD, and the difference is 20,000 euros in Denmark. So you would have to do this in France also. Some studies said it was more like around 10,000 euros. There are two reasons for this. First, non-ADHD patients tend to have a job that provides them with a better income because they have a higher level of education. Adults with ADHD will have a low income, they will pay fewer taxes, but they will receive less subsidies. Now, regarding hospital stays, they will tend to go more to hospital, to visit their GP more often, take more medication, not only ADHD medication, it could be antidepressants, benzodiazepines, although an ADHD treatment might actually have been more effective. Talking about cost, this is probably an interesting study also, and I'm just referring you to it. Now let's have a look at ADHD in a prison setting. Kathleen asked a question yesterday. She asked a question about the prevalence in prison, and I said it was 25% in adults, and generally speaking, but in prisons it's more like 26%, and this is a meta-analysis, which is huge. It's not necessarily surprising, but it is a huge number because of their impulsivity, they might be involved in fights and accidents, they might end up dealing with drugs, and all this might lead them to be sentenced to jail. So it's important to diagnose those disorders inside the prison to treat the patient. They are already in a place where they can receive treatment on a daily basis, and this can also avoid relapse once they are freed. Now let's have a look at mortality numbers. ADHD versus non-ADHD, 10,000 inhabitants. The mortality rate for all causes is 5.85%, whereas it's only 2.21 in the general population. But if we look at adulthood, this proportion remains the same for untreated people, 4.25 deaths per 10,000 inhabitants, compared with 1.58 for those people who were diagnosed and treated in childhood. So once more, this proves how important it is to have a proper diagnosis and to treat ADHD as early as possible. José Martínez-Raga would have said today that treatment and diagnosis have to be started before the child is 12. I have 5 minutes left. Well, that's fine. That's exactly what I just said. You have the ADHD patients, 5.85 compared with 2.21 in adulthood, 4.25 versus 1.58 if they were treated previously. Those are the comorbidities. Those are the most frequent comorbidities. As for children will be the oppositional defiant disorder, anxiety. This is a continuum that will remain throughout life. And also depressive disorders. For adolescents and adults, we will also see substance use. So if you have ADHD, those are the chances of having another psychiatric disorder. You have the numbers on the screen. So what are the effects or the impacts of ADHD? Well, patients who are substance users with an untreated ADHD have a retention time that is lower with the methadone treatment compared with the non-ADHD patients. Lower abstinence in opioid-dependent patients, more hospitalizations and suicide attempts, but when they are treated, fewer relapses and a higher percentage finds a job again. If you look at the epidemiological studies, ADHD adolescents, 39% of them are substance users versus 11% for non-ADHD adolescents. 23% of substance users meet the ADHD criteria, which means almost 1/4 of our patients. I'm not sure this is the number of patients that we actually diagnose. And finally, to conclude, ADHD patients have a greater risk to be addicted to nicotine. It's 3 times greater during adolescence and adulthood compared with non-ADHD, multiplied by 2 for alcohol abuse, multiplied by 1.5 for cannabis, and multiplied by 2 for cocaine. And if you weight all this, it's 2.5 more. Now, if we conclude some of those results, if ADHD patients that haven't been diagnosed nor treated would tend to become substance users early on, their substance use becomes more severe and more chronic. There's also a greater risk of polyaddictions, multiple addictions, also a greater risk of psychiatric comorbidities, and a lower retention rate. This is the reason why within our hospitals and examples, we really have to focus on those issues. We need to implement the right resources in order to assess those patients because they really need it. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Arcaïd. On te
Thank you so
d'avoir
much,
tenu le temps et puis
Arcade.
de
Thank you much
terminer
for
par une dernière
being
slide,
on
ce qui appelle à
time.
notre attention ce
your last
sur le
slide,
déficitaire de l'attention.
Really
Merci beaucoup.
raises our
On peut
attention
remettre la
to
lumière
ADHD.
dans le public parce
once
qu'on va
more.
avoir
Thank
maintenant un
you.
temps d'échange avec
We're now going to have
avec la
a
salle.
discussion with our audience.
Moi, je suis Florence Vorspan, je suis professeure
I'm Florence Vorspan.
d'éthiologie à
I'm a
l'Université de Paris.
professor
On a
of
la chance
ecology
d'avoir avec nous
at
également
Paris University.
Laurence
We
Lalanne, qui est
have
professeure
Laurence
à
Lalanne with us
l'Université de
also, who is a
Et
professor at Strasbourg
alors,
University.
s'il y a une question brûlante,
So if there's a burning
on va vous
question,
laisser ouvrir
we are going
la session
to
de
let you
questions,
ask
et
the
puis après,
question
on aura
first, and then
probablement des
we might
commentaires
also have
et
a
des
few
questions.
comments and questions we want to ask.
Merci de m'avoir donné la parole une minute. Alors,
Etienne Camera, thank you. Bravo, congratulations, José, and congratulations, Archives. This is a very good presentation, very much to the point. I'd like to make 2 points concerning the semiologic table that you showed us. I did diagnose ADHD in adults and children for many years. I'd like to make 2 points in adults. Probably you should look at being bored, boredom, because these patients, I mean, the quality of life is not so good. It's a loss of opportunity. They can't really read a book from page 1 to the end. They can't remain seated to watch a movie, so they tend to get bored. So when you see bored patients, think about ADHD. It's not only road accidents, but I mean, recurrent trauma. Some people break their leg every other year because they are very impulsive and they are easily distracted, they lack attention, and of course, they're bound to fall. There are household home accidents. And the last point I'd like to make in retrospective diagnosis of children, their childhood, loss of esteem, very low esteem of a child, can start very early on at 8, 9, 10 years of age, not just in adolescence, because they had psychotrauma. And a child, don't forget that a child with this disorder is very unfortunate. Suppose his parents are already impulsive, life becomes impossible. There's bound to be some kind of ill treatment in the family history. They've been ill-treated, and which kind of conceals the diagnosis because they don't want to show symptoms, so they hide themselves. So you miss an early diagnosis, no opportunity to diagnose early. And on top of this, these children, one doesn't feel guilty when treating them, and hence the risk of sexual abuse. So the loss of esteem in children starts very early. What happens then? When you treat them, you anticipate that you're bound to fail. So there's a lot of work to do to be really supportive of these children, and that's where resilience comes in very handy. Now, low esteem, I agree with you, it starts much early, much before adolescence, as early as 5 or 6 years of age, when they realize, be it in leisure, sports activity, or again, birthdays, or their children that are not invited. And of course, it's easily accounted for. You need to tell them why they're not invited, and the impact is a major one. I'd like to pick up on what you said, Etienne. Now, there are problems with the dysfunctionals very often in these dysfunctional affections. Easy to identify, not easy to identify. People say, okay, it must be bipolar disorders rather than TDAH. And this is why this sensitivity to being rejected further activates the quest for substance. Any other questions? I see a hand, I think it's a Katia Elal. So the mic is coming to you, Katia. In the meantime, I have a question for Laurent. So these are tricky diagnoses. So you see patients who are 40 years. There have been the substance abusers for many years. And even if they tell stories which are extremely telling of their childhood, you observe them, you know, they come and go in the waiting room. They can't stop moving. How can you confirm the ADHD diagnosis in adults whose diagnoses were missed in childhood? It's difficult. There are neuropsychological evaluations that sometimes fail to identify such attention deficit disorders. Then you look at the impact, social, professional impact, or at school, the impact on this condition before you start treating it. So there are a number of tools to use in daily practice, but then reports by parents, school reports, the school charts, personal history. So this is where we can make a diachronic diagnosis, not just things you notice when you see the patients once in a while. So it opens a kind of a narrow window. This requires, of course, that you talk to the parent, and it's time-consuming and tricky. So, Katia Hillel, you have the microphone. What about your personal experience in prison? Yes, I'm going to ask the same question as the one I asked yesterday. Of course, one is very much interested by this 26% of ADHD prevalence in prison. So something should be done or could be done. You have to be, you are there at the right time, at the right moment. So you should be able to act and to do something useful. Now, what about the profile? You refer to impulsive persons. Yes, but in prison, many inmates are antisocial. So impulsivity is something frequent. It's not a one-off trait that you can focus on and treat it. Similarly, in terms of evaluation, I do heard you. I knew it before, by the way. The history, the family history on the adolescent, and this is something we know nothing about. So we'd be tempted to go there, but there are limits. So what about data concerning the profiles with emergent traits that would help you differentiate them from psychopaths? Are there specific traits? Can you hear me?
Non, alors peut-être je me suis mal expliqué.
Maybe I didn't make myself clear. I did not say that being impulsive should guide you to ADHD diagnosis in prison. When they are in prison, in Bayonne, of course, our prisons are much smaller than yours, but we have a center, XAPA, and whenever this is required, I go there. I go to the prison to score, you know, the DIVA scale, a neuropsychological assessment, so that I have something to work on. And then what we try to do is when the inmate is released, because they don't spend that much time in prison. When they're released, XAPA does this. At XAPA, starts the treatment and uses this opportunity to ask the family to come in, so that they either confirm our impression, because the role of the family is very important. Now, what happens then when they become adults? Sometimes they don't see their family anymore. All the symptoms you referred to earlier, you know, they're constantly fighting with everybody. They don't have any papers and any ID. Well, my mother, my I was fed with my mother, so I decided to go away, and it makes the situation even more complicated. But if you can have a number of self-questionnaires to use as a filter, a first filter in prison, I don't know how much time you have. We can go there, because we can take some time from the one which is made available to us by SAPA. I don't know. I don't know what your schedule is. I don't know how much time you have. Sorry. We need a microphone in the first row, and then Jean-Pierre. But Marie Bonnec, waiting for the mic to come on stage. Nestor.
Talking about adults that are diagnosed late, and what is in your view the best psychological treatment? Is it integrated substance abuse and ADHD treatment together, or should it be performed by different professionals? Et je répète la question en français. Quelle est la meilleure option de traitement, et notamment est-ce que dans l'équipe de Nestor Sherman, ils ont déjà des groupes thérapeutiques intégrés dans lesquels l'abus de substances et le TADA sont pris en charge par les mêmes professionnels dans les mêmes séries de groupes?
Okay, thank you for your question. The main target of the dual disorder field is to integrate the field of mental disorders, and substance use disorder or addiction or addictive disorder are mental disorder. We need to integrate the treatment. We need to treat at the same time. And maybe we can personalize the treatment, of course. If the patient is totally drunk, we can treat at this moment. But the proposal is that we must treat our patients from the first moment with all the symptoms that they are presented, including tobacco use disorder, because if we are treating tobacco use disorder, for example, with varenicline, now is not able to get varenicline, we are treating ADHD also, and different, and probably and affective disorders and cognitive disorders, and this is the reason. But from the neuroscience perspective, we need to treat all the we need to treat patients with and at the same time from the old symptoms that they are coming to our clinics.
Thank you.
Merci. Donc, il y avait une question.
Thank you. We had a question. Marie Bonnec.
Merci Florence.
Thank you, Florence. I'd like to thank the two speakers, Kate, particularly for his very nice assessment. You said that if TDAH, that many adult patients with the obvious signs of attention deficit disorder, and while you don't find the symptoms retrospectively, I do think that these clinical signs are present from the very early stages, and this is why the patients end up being addicts. Yes, you're right. The large majority of people or patients we see when the adults had already symptoms when they were children. Now, there's a small caveat, though, in women or girls, because girls tend to be less impulsive than boys when a child. And this is why the attention deficit is missed. It's not interesting when they are adults, because probably something else. You have a problem with your memory. Now, if you take a closer look, you may see that in the lack of planning ability, sometimes impulsivity starts when adult, when it was present at childhood. This is my only comment. Yeah, we are starting a TCC group regardless of the disorder, because there are so many disorders involved. Attention deficit, maybe next year, the year after, we'll be in a position to show you the results of this initiative. Question? First of all, I'd like to thank and congratulate Nestor and Arkes for the excellent presentations. Excellent presentations.
Le mérite de souligner
and useful in that they underscore a problem. It's not just one problem among other problems when you deal with the dual disorders. I think it's something which has something to do with the human rights. Thank you again, Arkes, because you accepted to give this presentation at the last minute without any preparation, and you did it wonderfully. It's been great. And I'd like to thank you and congratulate for our work on a daily basis when we try to identify attention deficits in EXAPA. This is very useful. We realize, in fact, you've lifted the veil on something which is quite important. Now, just a very brief memory. At the end of a career, I had a pretty long career. I was fortunate for more than 2 decades of medical director of a CMPP, Medical Psychological Center in Bayonne. And retrospectively, I contributed to treat generation or ill-treat or maltreat generation of children. Because we would give them psychomotive re-education, rehabilitation, family therapy, cod liver oil, and an anecdote in passing. I knew Manuel Bouvard. Some of you may know him. 30 years ago, he was a young pediatrician at Robert Douai, one of the French doctor to study ATDH. So he was appointed to this hospital in Bordeaux. I was the medical director there and asked him whether he could come and discuss TADH because you're an international expert in this field. Could you come and talk to our psychiatrist? And I will introduce him to the colleagues who are present in the region. So we got ready for this meeting. We prepared ourselves. And the head of the infantile ward back then calls me and says, "Aha, you have a sense of humor, don't you?" She was kind of joking. I said, why are you saying this to me? No, it must be a joke. You're not supposed to ask Emmanuel Bouvard to come and discuss TDH. What's the problem with him talking about attention deficit disorder? Well, you know, this is a declaration of war. And a colleague of mine, I was really shocked. Why are you saying that I'm declaring the war? There is no such thing as TDAH. This comes from the USA. They have attention deficit disorder. And, well, I'll skip the rest. So this was the situation. Yet, I set up a whole system to screen, manage, and treat the attention deficit disorder patients in young people, and then I switched to addiction. And when I passed then it's not working anymore. That department, that activity is not active anymore. Well, psychiatrists who work with young people, maybe a majority in this country, and many psychiatrists there in that country do not want to hear about it, even less don't want to deal with it. So this idea of human rights being involved there, it comes from Gabriela Fischer. She teaches in Vienna. She was present in Paris and in Grenoble.
Elle en fait une affaire.
To her, the lack of screening prison inmates, TDAH, attention deficit disorder, when you see them, these inmates with the lack of a treatment left these inmates totally collapsed. And so your conferences, your symposium, Nestor, is quite important. So please continue. You do the work of a missionary there and speak as a witness, because this is something that belongs to human rights. Thank you very much, Jean-Pierre. Yes, indeed, it is important. We don't realize that there are so many controversies around many treatments given to addicts. Initially, replacement therapies, there was such a strong opposition, and then it becomes the run-of-the-mill, and patients, inmates have access to it. To me, it seems only logical. So we need people who really carry the fire, carry the torch, and get the message across. Thank you very much for your speeches, your presentations, and this very lively discussion. I hope you'll be able to meet again with Mrs. Brueck, because we are eager to see the results of our work on addictions, dual disorders, ADHD. Thank you.